Hi, I'm Jennifer Sir of the Sewing Room in Alameda. Today, I'm going to walk through my presentation about jobs in fashion and sustainability. It's one of the presentations I've been giving to high schools recently, and I think it's really important because we really need a new workforce in the fashion industry, who are committed to sustainability. Because as we know, or many of us know, that fashion is one of the biggest polluters in the planet next to the oil industry. So we need to come up with new solutions so we're not contributing to to climate change as much as we have been. I personally love clothing and I love making my own clothes. And that's one of the ways we can be sustainable in fashion is to make your own clothes. And I've always found fashion really fascinating, and it's really the only thing I've ever wanted to do. But I also have a deep appreciation for the environment, and I think it's super duper important for us to be aware of how our clothing is contributing to climate change, and what we can do to mitigate that problem on a micro level, but perhaps maybe even on a macro level as well. So, without further ado, let me get to my presentation. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. We're going to go here, share, and go to slides and slideshow. Let's just give it a little minute. So, yes, so this is my presentation on careers in fashion and sustainability. So let's create a sustainable future together. I'm Jennifer Sir, like I said, founder of the Sewing Room, and my email is Jennifer at thesewingroomalameda.com. If you have any questions, just feel free to reach out. Yes, a little bit about me if you didn't know it. I'm the owner of the Sewing Room. My career started, well, I really started designing and things when I was very little. And then I was single minded and knew I wanted to go to fashion school. So I went to FIDM and I graduated with a fashion design degree. I studied fashion design. And while I was studying fashion design, I learned pattern making, design. I improved my sewing skills and learned about sewing in the fashion industry and what that was like and how it was different from home sewing. So there were lots of things that I learned at FIDM. After FIDM, I had a short little stint as a self-employed person, and that didn't really work out at age 19. I didn't really understand about taxes. So I eventually got a job at Gap, and I worked in their corporate offices as a technical designer. So a technical designer, and you can go back to my video. I think I have a video on technical design and what that is. But a technical designer is someone who works with the designer and the factories and the production team and merchandising team to help get the clothing to market or to production. It's sort of pre-production, and we make sure it fits right, and that the factories are doing what they need to do in order to produce the type of quality of garment that we're looking for in that complies with what the merchandisers, designers, production team, what it all wants. So um, it was quite a responsibility. I had different products that I worked on. Gap is really big, so it was like I handled one part of the product. I handled women's knits, and then I did Gap Body, and I oversaw Gap Body for men and women's loungewear. And then I decided that I kind of needed something different, and I had a career. I just changed careers completely and became a bridal designer because I had made my own wedding gown or designed my own wedding gown, and then started making other people's wedding gowns. And I thought, oh, that's really what I want to do, and it was fantastic. I loved doing that. But while I was getting started doing that, after I left Gap, I also had to do a little freelancing because I wasn't making the kind of income, again, as a self-employed person, that I needed to for my regular life. So I started teaching at CCA in the fashion department. And that's where my love of teaching really, really began. I love everything about teaching except grading homework. that's not so fun. But everything else about it is. I love sharing my skills. I love, being able to help people understand how garments are put together and how to make patterns. It's really, really fun for me. But so I freelanced doing that while I was building my bridal business. And I also occasionally freelanced back at Gap and other companies too when I needed a little extra money. So a few years into it, my husband and I decided to have a baby, and so I closed my bridal business down for a little while. And I loved having a child, but I still really wanted to teach. So, and I was also looking for something that was a little more flexible that I could do while she was in preschool, or I could do, when we had a little bit of childcare. So I ended up teaching kids out of our home. And the child in the picture on the runway is my first fashion student that I've ever had, who was 8 years old when she started with me, and now she's already, I think, graduated from Central St. Martin's in London, which is in London School of Fashion, which is pretty cool. But I worked with her very early on and started developing these classes, these after school classes and camps for kids. And I, from that experience, developed the sewing room, which is what I do now is manage the sewing room. I also have a pattern company called Bonjour Teaspoon, which is basically classic designs that are fairly easy to sew for the tween age set. Yes, so we were founded in 2012 as the sewing room, but I'd been teaching before that. We have classes in sewing, pattern making, fashion design, and illustration. We serve kids, teens, and adults. We have a fashion studies program. We have classes 7 days a week. So there's a lot going on at the sewing room. Okay, the environmental impact of fashion production. Why fast fashion is problematic? Well, did you see that big pile over there on the side of the screen? That is the landfill or a landfill. There are landfills all over the world full of trash and lots of clothes get discarded. So we have to really take a look at how we're consuming and the environmental impact that our consumption has on our planet. Um, it's affecting climate change because of all of the pollution and all the off gassing from the chemicals made in produced by making clothing. So high waste, let's talk about three things. High waste. Clothes are often low quality, leading to quick disposal, and tons of textile waste ends up in the landfills. Now that's textile waste from the factories because after they make the clothes, there's all sorts of textile waste. It's not just, when you make a single piece of fabric, unless you're a zero waste company, there's waste that happens in the manufacturing process. That waste actually happens from, growing the fibers, if you're doing natural fibers, all the way through to production. But if you're also doing chemical fabrics like polyester or nylon or any of those, there's all sorts of chemical waste that happens as well. That leads to resource intensive production. Fast fashion relies on water, energy, and chemicals in massive amounts. So when we look at some of these big companies, they really are like, they're producing hundreds of thousands of SKUs. And the SKU relates to one style, one article of clothing. And that article of clothing may get produced 100 times, 1,000 times. And if you think about that, if you multiply that with the fast fashion industry, with big companies who sell things really cheap, that's fast fashion. It's not slow fashion. We can talk about that a little bit later, but fast fashion is like these big, I'm not even going to name names because we all know who they are. And they're really destroying our planet. So, but yes, so in most cases where we have lesser expensive clothing that use a lot of petrochemicals, then we have both resource intense production and a lot of pollution. So the production process often releases harmful chemicals and microplastics into rivers, oceans, and soils. And that can lead to there's a huge problem with that, especially fellow plastics in the ocean. It's not only affecting the sea life, like getting tangled in their just sea life getting tangled in the plastic waste, but it also has contributed to coral bleaching, which is destroying the whole ecosystem of our ocean. So that's that's another thing. Okay, labor exploitation. So poor working conditions. Many fast fashion items are produced in factories with unsafe, low-wage labor, often in developing countries where labor laws may be weak. And people often get very low wages when they are a garment worker. They get paid typically below living wage standards and may face long hours and unsafe working conditions. Well, let's break this down a little bit because labor has moved from the US to overseas. And when we look at labor and when we look at the footprint of our fashion, we really have to think about many things and why our our clothing is made overseas is because um, we no longer have manufacturing on a large scale here in the US. We still have some, but not a lot. And that's because of trade agreements that happened in the US. There were international trade agreements that happened, I think, in the 80s and 90s that really changed the nature of manufacturing and where and how we can get our clothes produced. So a lot of the production that was happening in the US, because the labor was so cheap overseas, uh, the manufacturing just left the US and went overseas. So one of the things with doing that is the farther away we are from where our clothes are getting made, where our food's being grown, all of that. So it has to travel. Our so we have not only the labor issue, but the transportation issue. So transportation has to happen from the time the fibers are made to to the place the fibers are getting woven, to the place where then that material, that woven fabric or knitted fabric, is then going to a factory to get cut into pieces, and then it usually travels somewhere else to get sewn, and then it travels somewhere else to get distributed, like it travels again. So it could your clothes travel a lot before they even make it here. So your fibers get woven, and then maybe it goes to a whole different country for the fabric to be delivered to another country to produce, to cut and sew your garments. And then maybe it comes to the US, where it goes to a distribution center. And then from the distribution center, it drives out to different places. So it's a lot of transportation, and it's a lot of gas. It's a lot of fossil fuels that taking your clothes from place to place. But my original point was about the labor exploitation, was that we have less and less control the farther away our clothes are made from us. So we, as in a lot of companies, what happens in a lot of big companies that are producing lots and lots of things is they have the best of intentions, and they find a factory that they work with overseas that they go visit maybe, and they comply with all the standards that we require of them. And then maybe your production grows and you start increasing how many things you're producing, and that factory can't really handle it. So it subcontracts out from there. And then the more that happens, the less likely the compliance with the rules and all of that is happening. I'm not letting anybody off the hook, but I just want people to be aware that it's more complicated than just having your clothes made in a sweatshop. The companies may think they're not being made in a sweatshop, but they actually are. So there's the farther away our clothes are from where we are, the harder it is to determine how ethically they're made. So that's one thing to think about. Um, okay, let's talk about our own personal consumption here for a second. So we live in a world of disposable culture. Fast fashion encourages buy and throw away mindset, creating a cycle of overconsumption and waste, and trend obsolescence. Things that were trendy last month aren't trendy anymore. So people throw away their clothes. Well, I would like to have us think a little bit more deeply about this and consider how we consume and maintain the clothing that we already own. So one of the biggest things we can do is change how we consume. Okay, why does it matter? Why does sustainability matter? Well, we want to make sure we're doing the right thing, right? We don't want a planet that's dead before our grandchildren, can even be born. We want to have a future for our planet, and um, we just want to be doing good. I want to be doing good. I want to be doing the best I can in the choices that I make. So some of the things that we can do to make a difference are reducing our carbon footprint. So, like I said before, a lot of our fashion travels all over the world. One of the biggest ways we can reduce our carbon footprint is to make our own clothes. So, when you make your own clothes, you reduce the whole manufacturing process in half at least. So you still have to get your materials from somewhere. And it's rare you can buy materials made in the US. It's not impossible. And they are much more expensive when they're made here, but you can find them here. So that's a plus. That means less transportation. However, most of the time we do still need to, like, our fabrics are woven in, and our yarns are spun overseas. So that has to get from there to there. But we're not using labor overseas, and we're not. It really cuts that whole process in half. So, highly recommend you learn how to sew your own clothes. Also, some sustainable practices. So we're going to go over this a little bit more, but we want to check out the companies that we buy from and make sure they're using sustainable practices. They're, aware of where their fabric comes from. They're making sure to pay their employees a living wage, and they're using innovative ways to use maybe recycled fabrics or something like that. And then circular fashion is another thing. And I'll go over all of those things here in a minute. We'll start with reducing your carbon footprint. So one of the ways you can do it is by supporting sustainable brands, voting with your dollars. So I really love that concept. That's like making sure the money that you spend goes to companies who are doing good. So do your due diligence. Don't just go onto their website. Go and find articles written by other entities like the New York Times or the Washington Post, and find out, or the Wall Street Journal, find out what's happening in business with these companies that say they're sustainable. Why are they sustainable, and how are they sustainable? And do a little more research before you buy from them. Like I said earlier, learning to sew and repair your own clothing, the longer you can make your clothing last, the more impact you'll have. So we want to extend the life of the clothes we already own. And we can do that by learning how to repair our clothes. And we teach that at Sewing Room. We have a mending and hemming class. We have sewing. We have all sorts of sewing classes. I think that's a great way to reduce your carbon footprint. Another thing you can do is you can participate in clothing swaps and thrift shopping. I love thrift shopping. I love finding vintage things that are old, because there's so many clothes out there, and they can be restyled. They can be put into a new outfit. So just because somebody's worn it already doesn't mean it needs to be discarded. We can totally reuse those things and keep that system going. You can organize school or community events like swap meets or upcycling workshops. We also teach upcycling classes at the Sewing Room. You can raise awareness on social media, and you can buy vintage or secondhand. That goes back to the like participating in clothing swaps or thrift shopping. It's all part of the same loop. Okay, what is circular fashion? So it is when your clothing goes through this whole process where it starts out as a plant and then it ends up back in the ground. So what happens is you need to have, when you're talking about circular fashion, clothing needs to be made of biodegradable materials. One of the most biodegradable and sustainable materials we can use is wool, but there's other natural fibers like cotton, hemp, um, and a few others. Some natural fibers like bamboo and rayon have a lot of processing that make them not so sustainable in the end. But they may be a natural fiber and they may be biodegradable. So if you're using those and they are maybe vintage, that's probably better than new. End of life decomposition. So instead of sitting in landfills for centuries, biodegradable fabrics will decompose, returning the nutrients to the soil. So that's really important. As many things that we can do that we could just throw in our backyard into a compost pile and then regenerate that into soil. That is the way we want to go if we can. We want to reduce pollution. Biodegradable materials minimize environmental pollution compared to synthetic fibers. So synthetic fibers take a long time to break down, and they're made from chemicals, mostly petrochemicals. So they release microplastics and toxins as they degrade, whereas cotton, wool, natural fibers like hemp, those aren't releasing as many chemicals, I should say, because a lot of times the clothing is still finished with some chemicals or washing chemicals. So just a lot less is happening when you use biodegradable materials. This is what they call a closed loop system. So fashion items are produced, used, and reintegrated back into the earth in a continuous eco-friendly cycle. They support regeneration. So decomposed materials enrich the soil health, promoting a regenerative cycle that aligns with nature's processes. So it's like working with the process that our earth has already. So it's kind of a high goal, circular fashion, but whatever we can do to keep things in that circle, the better. Okay, so look at these different fashion careers. There's so many different fashion careers. I have another presentation just about fashion careers, but I wanted to talk about like what you can do when you're working in these careers. So we have fashion designer, pattern maker, fashion buyer, merchandiser, dressmaker, tailor, alteration specialist, wardrobe consultant. There's all of these different jobs in the fashion industries. And there's ways that you can promote sustainability in those careers. Here we go. How will you choose? Isn't that a cool picture? I love that picture. Anyways. Okay, integrating sustainability into your career. So I'm just going to go through a few careers because really anything you can do to be a conduit for change in the fashion industry is super important. So we're going to start with the careers that I actually know about. So fashion designers, you can aim to work with sustainable brands. You can choose recycled materials and you can influence your brand partners. Marketing and branding specialists can work with companies that promote transparency and ethical practices. So you can choose on some level who you work with. Now, an alteration specialist. I can't really tell you how important alterations people are and how few we have left in the world. I have a business with the name sewing in it. And because of that, I get calls every single day of people wanting me to hem their pants or repair their clothing. And that's not what we do. But there's like maybe five or 10 different places in town where you can have all of that stuff done. So there's definitely a need a need for people who want to alter your clothes and know how to mend, sew, hem, shorten your sleeves, all of that. So that is inherently helping people alter existing clothing and make them more wearable, and helping them extend the life of the products they already own. So really, I think a very important job that you could do if you like to sew and if you like to help people. That's a good job. Integrating sustainability into your career some more. So merchandisers and buyers. So a merchandiser is someone who works in a company, and I think I've interviewed merchandisers on my channel, so you should go look. But they decide what clothing is going into a store. They're the ones who buy the product from the designers. They buy the product from the designers. Like if you're in a company that has merchandisers and designers, they're just deciding which pieces go into the line, which pieces are going to sell best. Um, they understand the businessy part behind the production. So, as a merchandiser, especially if you have an online business, you can use ethical sourcing. You can use or data driven inventory management. So that's like knowing, based on what you've sold or what you're selling, how much you need to make. So if you have data um, for your management, you can figure out how not to create a lot of waste, and you can encourage eco-friendly consumer behavior, like using reusable bags. You can sell repair kits or have buyback programs. So there's many companies who offer these buyback programs where you can bring in your old versions of their clothes and you'll get credit towards buying new stuff from them, or maybe they'll even give you money for them. So I think that's a terrific way of keeping existing clothing in the consumer loop and not having it go into the landfill. Now, textile designers can focus on eco-friendly fibers, use natural dyes, and utilize low water techniques when they're creating textiles. So one of our employees at the sewing room, I should say one of my team, um, Christine, for her thesis project, created a kombucha leather, which was a faux leather that biodegraded really easily. So she was really into cosplay, and she noted that there was a lot of um, leather being used, a lot of plastic leather, and she invented this material that could be used, um, and it would biodegrade more very quickly compared to leather and um, to the plastic leather. Anyways, the artificial leather. So I thought it was a very experimental textile, but I thought that was really brilliant that she came up with something that was so eco-friendly for something that, in cosplay, those, you don't wear those costumes for a long time. So it's something to think about when you're creating things like that. Wardrobe consultants, that's another job that you wouldn't think is necessary, but there's a lot of people who really need help getting dressed. They really need, maybe they don't have a lot of time because they're a big executive and they need to do work. Work in their company, and that's what they're focused on, but they want to look good while they do it. And wardrobe consultants can often help find a wardrobe for these people who are struggling, or with people who've changed their life a bit. Like after you've had a baby, your body's different and you need someone that's going to help you find clothes that are flattering for you. So these things are things that wardrobe consultants do. And some of the ways that you can be sustainable in that job is by promoting a capsule wardrobe. Now, a capsule wardrobe, and we've talked about that with on the YouTube channel before as well, so you can go back and look at that. Um, is having several pieces that all go together. so that you can create many different outfits out of 30 different pieces of clothing. And it's just you're going to end up with fewer clothes, so you're consuming less, and they're usually a higher quality, so they're going to last longer. So having a capsule wardrobe practice is something that a wardrobe consultant can do. They can also encourage secondhand and vintage shopping. They can support slow fashion brands and suggest creative ways to refresh or repurpose old clothing. So that's it, friends. That's my presentation on sustainability and fashion. I'm sure we could go deep on some of these things, but for now, that's what it is. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and hit subscribe. It really helps us out. And here's all of my contact information in case you want to get in touch. So the sewing room, alameda.com. And we have some freebies too on our website, on our fashion studies page. If you sign up for our email, we have a jobs and fashion guide that you might find really fascinating and helpful. And it's just downloaded as soon as you sign up. Anyways, have a great day. And until next time, happy fashion, everyone.